This has been an incredible year for games. We've had some masterpieces drop this year, and also we've seen some of the most historic flops that I have no doubt will be talked about for decades to come. I'm talking about failures the likes of which I didn't even know were possible in the modern gaming industry. Concord is the obvious one that pops into everyone's noodle because that is probably statistically the biggest catastrophe in the entire entertainment sector. Somehow the goober goblins at the top of the food chain at Sony convinced themselves, like delusionally brainwashed themselves into thinking that somehow Concord was a worthwhile investment, so they dumped hundreds of millions of clams into it, and it was doomed from the start. It was dead on arrival. It never even had a chance to breathe. It was smothered before it even left the womb. It'd be like pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into asbestos and fidget spinners and then wondering why it didn't work, why it didn't make money. Concord cost so much money, and it didn't even last as long as a mosquito. It had a shorter lifespan than a mosquito. If I farted right now, that smell would probably linger longer than Concord existed as a playable game before they took it off life support. But it wasn't even life support because it never had life. This is not a video about Concord. The point I was making is we have seen some incredible games like Nine Souls, like Black Myth Wukong, like Space Marine 2, like Astrobot, and then we've seen some things that are absolutely going to go down in the fucking books, etched into the tablets of time as an embarrassment, a shame, a blight on the gaming industry like Concord, and like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. That's what I actually want to talk about today. So many of you probably don't remember Suicide Squad. That came out earlier this year to a collective yawn and sigh from pretty much every gamer ever. Warner Bros. Reportedly lost $200 million on this flop, but unlike Sony with Concord, Warner Bros. Is still going with Suicide Squad. Season 3 just dropped to a whopping 300 players on release day. They were scratching at their neck, foaming at the mouth, waiting for Season 3 to drop so they could play as their favorite hero, Lawless. I don't know who this character is. It doesn't seem like it's a character many people were expecting, much like how Season 2 brought Mrs. Freeze, where most people were expecting it to be like a bigger character in the universe. And Season 3 has even less players than Season 2. And now, 2 days after it dropped, it's back down to like 100. It is struggling. It never really got off the ground running in any way, shape, or form. But they're not giving up on it. They're still giving it CPR on this cold corpse here. 300 players, and they're still putting resources behind this. They said $200 million in the shitter, we can do more. We can shovel more money into the fucking furnace here. So they keep putting content into it. And it got me thinking, what's more shameful? Concord only existing for 2 weeks before they realized what a joke it was and they just pulled the plug? Or Suicide Squad still getting updates so many months later that nobody wants, it doesn't improve the game, and it's still laughable? Which one is worse? I don't have the answer because both have pros and cons. Concord, the star that burns brightest burns out quickest. You had 2 weeks of playtime, 2 weeks of fun with Concord, and then it's gone. And now it just exists as a myth and the punchline to many jokes. Suicide Squad, though, it's still trotting along like an injured animal, still just like crawling its way through the desert here. I think that actually might be more sad. I feel especially bad for the developers that have to keep putting content into this, knowing full well no one's playing it, no one wants it, and it's probably not content they want to make either. It's decisions from the suits that say, hey, we marketed it as a live service game, we got to keep putting shit in it, sorry, so you're going to put this shit in it. So they do. That's got to be a terrible feeling. And I know Concord and Suicide Squad aren't alone here. They're far from the only ones at the bottom of the septic tank of the AAA gaming space. It has been a rough year for a lot of AAA games. They take like a decade now to make a single game, and it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to make them. So they're already kind of set up for failure unless they somehow just hit a home run, like a fucking grand salami, and make like $1 billion, but that doesn't happen often. So even when a game is well received and popular for the most part, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a successful investment for the company. Take, for example, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That game has glowing reviews from pretty much everybody, and according to Square Enix, it really underperformed for them. So AAA gaming isn't in a healthy state, and it hasn't been for a while. I get asked a lot during streams if I think there's going to be a video game collapse. I firmly believe there won't be, but I do think the AAA space, like specifically AAA gaming, is going to have a drastic overhaul as they're having this rude awakening where they realize they can't just continue to push out the same fucking game every single time, like Ubisoft. Star Wars Outlaws, I fucking hated. There's a lot of people that love it because it's familiar. It's a very same Ubisoft experience. It's comfort food, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. I am just very tired of that formula, and it seems like most people are because Star Wars Outlaws has reportedly only sold 1 million copies so far, making that a big underperformer for Ubisoft. Another really recent example is Bethesda learning a hard lesson with Starfield Shattered Space, their new DLC that just dropped like a day ago. That had so much hype out the wazoo, except it really didn't. So the DLC dropped. It didn't really like blow up the player count or anything. There was a bit of a surge in players, but nothing crazy. And it turns out the DLC is just more of the exact same thing, and a lot of people are extremely disappointed with it. So much so, in fact, that it is now one of Bethesda's lowest rated products ever. Just like when the game came out, people are exhausted of the exact same formula Bethesda has been using for so long without any real deviation or innovation or improvement, really. It's like just my main critique of it is just how boring it is. Like, it's just empty planets that you explore with nothing really to do that makes it interesting. The characters aren't nearly as interesting as they were in previous Bethesda games. Like, everything about it just seems like a downgrade from previous Bethesda games, but now it's in space. The game is just half-baked and lame. It was so lame, in fact, that modders made a statement saying that they didn't have any drive to actually mod Starfield because they didn't like it. It was boring. And to this day, there is no real modding scene for Starfield. Not like a very big one compared to like every other Bethesda title ever. Like fucking Skyrim is still getting thousands of mods every day, basically. It's like Bethesda titles and mods used to go hand in hand. They were like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Till Starfield. No one wanted that peanut butter and jelly. That was a fucking peanut butter and ass sandwich, and no one was wanting that ass. It's just, these companies are putting more and more money and more time into developing worse and worse products. Somehow, even though the technology, like with the Unreal Engine and everything, continues to evolve and get better, somehow the games don't. And I'm talking about AAA gaming. I think indie gaming is in the best state it has ever been. The lower budget titles are fucking crushing it this year. Absolutely crushing it. Like Nine Souls. I can't sing Nine Souls praises enough. But AAA companies, I think, are so fucking lost in the sauce. Like, it's so expensive and they're so afraid to do anything that might be like a risk to their bottom line, so they end up playing it so safe and just give you like the same game for the 1,000th time, but this time it took them 5 extra years, and people are just kind of tired of it. Like, who the fuck was asking for a new hero shooter like Concord, and especially a $40 one? No one in the world, no sane human being outside of Arkham Asylum would ask for something like that. Or who was asking for a live service Suicide Squad game? Like, it's all just absurd. Though, for Star Wars Outlaws, people have been asking for an open world Star Wars game for years, but what they got was a Ubisoft open world Star Wars game. And nobody wants that, really. It's just one of those things where I think AAA gaming is not in a healthy spot. Anyway, though, just wanted to rant about this a little bit. That's it. See ya.